Hi, good morning and good evening to all of you. Today we bring another episode and we bring Mark for this session. The key objective of this podcast is about 4 key to engage and retain talented people during your next acquisition. So most of the time, the people are around, most of the deal we do, people are in between. It's a like central position for most of the deal. So we selected this topic and we thought Mark will be the right person, having so much of expertise in his journey of M&A deals. And especially his focus is primarily to look at people side, culture and change management. So that's why we choose this topic. So I welcome Mark this morning to talk about these 4 important key points. And I leave Mark. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm a big fan of the program, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak to your audience today.
Yes. So I think if you can give a little background about yourself for my audience so that they know who you are.
Sure. So I've been working with mergers and acquisitions for over 30 years, and I've been working with them as a consultant with Ernst & Young and Crowe, where I've been for 6 years, and I'm a managing director of their HR M&A practice, but also as a corporate human resources person. So I've done M&A work with American Express, Thomson Reuters, iGate Capital. In addition, I've been an advisor to private equity firms on not only their acquisition due diligence, but also integration. So really those 3 points. And in those acquisitions, I've either been an advisor, a project leader, or provided hands-on support.
Okay, thanks, Mark. I think this is very interesting because the today topic we selected because we understood that people are more important. And I think any deal you look at, even you go and search about most deal failure, culture is always one of the main pillars. And there are many subjects around culture. So change management, the people, the job role, and overall, if you look at culture aspect, is not just culture, but it is connected with 3 or 4 different pillars. I think we are focusing today on change management and other things. But just, just for this audience, I want to focus our first point of change management, right? So any M&A deals, any M&A deal, even in my career, when I was part of any deal, the change management was very, very prominent, right? And it is always in the central of people, and people are one who are going to affect this change. Right. So my question is, the change management is always the center, but when the change management process starts in any M&A deal? So
I think it really should start in the basic deal strategy. And the reason for that is in some deals, it's more important that employees change than in others. So for example, if it's a bolt-on or add-on acquisition, well, it may only be the senior executives who now have to report to a private equity firm or a strategic acquirer. However, if it's a full integration or something where it's very important that the individuals who come in through the acquisition adapt quickly and are productive and stay with the organization, well, then that needs to be understood up front, I believe, because then that can affect the due diligence process and then, of course, affect the integration design and delivery. So just in brief, depending on the deal type, I think that's where change management considerations come in, not only for the target company, but also for the acquirer. So for example, I can think of in my career, I was working with an IT services company that wanted to do more project work. They'd been doing by the hour support to clients. So they bought a software firm. And the thought was the two would just integrate and now they would be able to do more project work. And the software firm would have a group of individuals who could help them on projects implementing their software. But what they didn't think about was the change management piece, because how the type of people who were hired, how they were compensated, what their career paths were completely different. So it wasn't as easy as putting two companies together because of the potential business benefits, but it was really understanding what the acquirer would need to do differently and also what the acquired company would need to do differently. So that's an example where both were going to undergo a lot of change, but they really didn't think about it up front. And that led to a lot of problems in achieving the goals they were trying to accomplish.
Right. So I think one more question, since you brought this point, it came to my mind, like, who are the key change makers at the beginning of the deal? Who is one in the organization, either buy side or sell side? You know, so there are two part of question maybe. One is who is responsible for driving that. The second part will be, there is any change leader in the company, we need to identify in any M&A deals, so that this person becomes the change leader and he drives all the change.
Yeah. So great points. I'll try to take them one by one. So the first one, who is the change leader? I think first it's the chief executive who is ultimately going to approve the deal, or the board that's going to approve the deal, to understand that the change is going to be important and to make it a priority.
Right.
In other words, the change is something that won't be, and this goes to the second part of your question, isn't just going to be handed off to the middle managers for them to manage. So in other words, at the deal strategy phase, that's where the leaders, it's best if they're developing the change strategy. And that can be something as formal as a change management stream with the integration management office,
right,
which is the way that I found it be more effective, as opposed to someone in HR who's working on change management activities, but they're not really part of the decision process.
Right.
They're not sitting in the room.
Right.
So that's I think goes to who's on the team from there. Usually a work stream devoted to change management is very useful. And then there's an accountable individual. And in the large integrations that I've done, as much as possible, the head of the integration management office also becomes the change leader, because they have the perspective across the organization, and they have the ability to, influence behavior. So I think there's a couple key points today. Starts at the in your question, starts at the top. Is not an assumption that's going to happen on its own, but there's accountability. And then that also goes to due diligence, looking at what's going to change in due diligence and what needs to happen during and after integration. And then again, that not how does the target need to change alone, but the acquirer is going to need to change as well, potentially, especially if it's a different business model or a different product line, something of that nature.
Right. Thanks, Mark. I think this is a very good point, because even my experience, I have worked in a couple of large integration deals. I have seen that change management leader is a separate stream, which is identified at the beginning of the deal. And that person is driving, along with all the stream leaders, the IMO office, the head of integration, till integration is completed. So this role is quite, huge role, and it is, something which have to be driven. So many times change management leaders, they don't own anything, right?
Yes.
But they are accountable. They have to make sure that things are getting done. So I think these are my experience. So one of the deal I have seen that it was very, very critical and very important role for change management leaders. So now that comes to my another question is, in your opinion, suppose you become a change management leader, how difficult is to drive this change?
Yeah. So it's a really good point about, now that you've identified the role, who's the right person to fit the role.
Right.
Where I've seen the most success is someone who is used to working across department boundaries. So for example, if it's someone who's used to working just with others in their group and reporting up, that they may not have the skills to influence people to make decisions and do things without having the direct power, so to speak, of a reporting relationship. So sometimes, again, what I see as the best candidates are those who are either high potential or would be ready for a future promotion into a job that would require those types of skills. So on the selection side, it's if they already have experience driving change, maybe it's been an ERP system implementation, maybe it's been a digital transformation, maybe they've done a divestiture or something of that nature. If they have prior experience working across boundaries and being able to influence people without authority, that's a great profile. And interesting, those people are in several places around the organization. You know, they may be in operations, they may be someone in finance who's used to working across organizations. So I would look at, if I was encouraging a client to put someone in that role that had those skills, you know, to really look at the succession candidates, look at the people who've worked on projects before and have been effective, influencing without authority, and ideally that they've done other mergers and acquisitions, because as you and I know, one of the big factors in whether or not an acquisition will be successful is the experience of the individuals that are running it. You know, it's like you can't learn how to ride a bicycle from a textbook, right? You have to ride and you have to fall off and you have to get back on.
This is because this position require you to even deliver things which you don't really own, but you have to make sure that things, you know, like cross organization within the, departments, you have to drive things. As you gave a couple of examples, I think they are very critical. So what are the, if one or two challenges of this? One is, once you identify the guy who is going to drive this change, what could be, in your opinion, one or two, if you can say, what top challenges for this guy?
Yeah, so I'd say one challenge is I've seen several organizations try to downplay the change. In other words, the CEO or the executives will say, don't worry about change. Things are going to be basically the same. We'll let you know if anything changes. And the problem with that approach is that if you tell people nothing's going to change, and then you change the coffee in the break room, or you ask for 2 reports instead of 1, it can be perceived as, they're breaking their word. So I think one of the things is being very clear in all the communications that change will happen, and that going to the principles of the organization or the values, just some of the language to put around it, is that it'll be done, in a thoughtful and planned manner. It'll include feedback from, the leaders of both firms. So, when you can't tell them the why, you tell them the how. You can't say, here's the 10 changes, and there won't be more than 10. But you can say there'll be changes, and here's how we're going to make those decisions. Here's how we're going to communicate them and follow through. So that's one thing, kind of not being open about the fact that things are going to be changing. And the second piece, or the second challenge, would be just thinking that it happens naturally at the middle manager level, say, or the director level, that they're responsible for implementing it and overcoming those changes. So I find work up front, identifying what's changing for who and how, Is it different facilities? Is it different responsibilities? Are they going to be working with a new team?
Yeah.
Are they have to develop new skills? Once that's identified, then that's going to be used to create the plan. So, so again, kind of over optimism maybe, or paradoxically, the desire to make people feel good. But if you tell them nothing's going to change, they're only going to feel bad worse. I mean, later.
Exactly. Yeah. So that, so that is about change management. Now, if you look at, I do give example that, people, they need to know what is changing. So that also brings another important point about communication.
Yeah.
So any deal, if you look at, communication is very key. Either it's internal or it's external. So what do you think about communication? Why it's so critical? And give some example where you think that a critical, if well communication is adding more value to a deal success rather than poor communication can also distract the deal.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So when I think of even my own experience being in an acquired company or being with an acquirer, the question is what's happening to me, to a lesser extent, what's happening to my team, excuse me. And there's that uncertainty and that doubt. And when people are uncertain or doubtful, then they tend to step back and not contribute as much. And they're thinking about very personal things. Will I be able to pay my rent or mortgage? Will my children be able to go to the same school? All those types of things. So the way to address the what's in it for me, or what's needed for me, what's happening to me, I think is with a very organized communication plan. And when I talk about that, what I define it as a communication calendar, where it's identifying the communication messages, an event calendar, when is there going to be a meeting where the senior executive sits down with their own department, and then guidance, because it's important in these types of transactions, or really in all employee communication areas, that the messages are consistent. So what are the key messages? Who says what to whom, when? Some training in that. Sometimes before day one, I advise clients to bring the key leaders together and spend time, just like with a play, rehearsing the messages. So I think there's a formal aspect of it that has a lot of power. Excuse me. A lot of formal aspect that has a lot of power. And again, it also reinforces the notion that communication is everyone's job. Now, part of communications, of course, is also feedback. So that also means identifying people who are the key influencers. Maybe they're not in a certain spot on the org chart, but they're the ones that employees go to when they have questions. And they can be used not only to send messages, but also to listen and raise those messages back up. So, so the communication is, I think, influencers, a strong process, and then feedback, because certain messages are going to be well understood, and others may sound good to top management, but the person in the factory is not going to understand it. That's a lot of answer in one question.
I know this is very important, communication. And as you rightly said, that preparing the communication kit, and this kit is very consistent, have information about deal. If you go to factory, the communication could be different, but at least messaging are right. Then you go to middle management and top management. So how you communicate, the overall planning, the content, this all are very critical point of it. So I think this is a very important point. And I think this really adds a value to the success of the deal, right? Because better to let people know what is going to change, as you rightly said, and communicate properly. Communicate with the right messaging. Message should be consistent. Like as you said that we bring the communication kit, and this
Yes.
communication kit will be also given to managers who are going to train their teams, who are going to explain why this acquisition has happened, what is the benefit they are going to get,
Sure.
how their job is going to be saved, or maybe there is an opportunity to be find another position within the company. So I think these are the very critical components, and I think in my experience also I have seen that communication, which is very consistent, which is very organized, and also it's on time. It should
Yeah.
not happen the deal is closed and half of the people don't know. So these
Yeah.
are the very critical part of any deal. So either deal is small or big, doesn't matter, but these are very important aspect of anyone.
Yeah, and if I can add too, something that I've seen work very well would even be on the day one of the announcement.
Announcement, yeah.
Senior managers or go to all the locations and
Yeah.
they split it up. But it's not only the senior manager from the acquirer,
Right.
it's also from the acquired company, because ideally, and I'm sure you've seen this in your experience too, is that when you're setting up an integration management office, it's not just people from the acquirer leading the work streams. They have a counterpart. So then on day one, the power of having both those individuals in the room at a particular geographical location,
Right.
and bringing along things like the organizational T-shirts or hats, or hosting a lunch, listening.
Yeah.
That's all important. So it's the communications is there's the definite role for the acquired company as well, because by that time, especially day one, they should have been involved and been aware of all these types of things too. So the focus of the employee is on the opportunity versus the fear.
Yeah. So I think even in my experience, I had similar, I have seen that when we are doing a large integration, basically all these entire people who are going to work on integration part of, either internal communication or external communication, they all come in a kind of a conference together. They exchange their ideas. They identify what are the dependency between these two teams.
Yes.
They identify, as you said, they distribute T-shirts, some of the, the goodies, another thing. And that really gives lots of good binding between teams. And this team consists of not only the buyer, but seller is also involved. And one lesson which I have realized is if you involve your, if you are acquirer, and if you are, inviting and making your team with the acquiring company, it becomes very, very useful because they are involved very early from the day. So entire communication kit, planning, they also go and train to their team. And that becomes very important for any deal. So that is another point I thought I'll add.
Yeah.
So so another point which I had is, I took some note because so whenever we used to do deals, we used to take top lesson learned after important milestones. And then we did lots of roundtable within teams, sharing our knowledge at what went wrong, what we could have done better. And culture is very difficult, right? Because it's like involvement of culture becomes from the day one. So what are some of the top cultural issues you have found while doing your M&A deals?
Actually, as I think about that question, I also think of really what is similar to change management, and that is, is culture spoken about early in the deal? Is it a consideration like change management? Certainly, cultural change is something that's a big part of change management. That's why we're talking about it as one of the 4 keys. But the culture piece, I think one of the challenges that I've seen is even defining what culture is. So when that happens, culture can be anything. In other words, the deal failed because of culture. Well, what did it really mean? Well, it was culture. Oh, okay, it was culture. So I find it helpful, especially if it's going to be done and started in due diligence, is defining what culture is. And the way that I would define it, and a number of my colleagues who on the HR M&A roundtable, is the way things are done, meaning it's the working norms, it's how employees treat clients and each other. And because those are the types of relationships that are going to create the employee experience. And the employee experience is one of the things we know is going to affect how productive someone is going to be, or how whether or not someone that's really desired is going to stay with the organization. So then if we take that as a hypothesis, it's the way people treat each other and clients. Well, then the due diligence and the discussion is how do you understand that? How do you identify what that is? And some of it is just talking to people about, tell me about the people who get promoted here. What do they typically do? Well, they do things by themselves. They're heroes or heroines, and it's every person for themselves. Or this person really is a good mentor or coach and influences others and help the team. I'm not saying one culture is good or one's bad. It all depends on the business and what the culture is that they need. So I would say, just to go back again, the first is the definition of culture. Whatever the organization wants to use as a definition, then that allows them to ask questions and build a profile. I've also seen very often, you can start with what's the culture of the seller's deal team. Is there one person who makes all the decisions? Everyone else is basically gathering data for that one person. Do they have is there a difference of opinion, and is a difference of opinion welcome? So sometimes you would see a seller being maybe a very entrepreneurial organization. And then you have a buyer who is very bureaucratic and things have to go up and down the chain. Doesn't take much to see that there's going to be a clash there. And it's not a matter of one culture going away. It could just be as simple as, where are the areas that we need to be the same, like same in values, maybe the same approach to decision-making and accountability, but some of the things may not be there. And I think, I know you've had a lot of global experience as well. And I think then that adds another layer to culture of the national culture, how relationships are built, how free people feel to give their opinions. So there's cultures at certain functions, a finance culture, a sales culture, there's national culture, and then company culture. So again, if we're thinking about culture, we have to consider the elements of each one of those in this area.
I think they are, as you rightly said, culture is not one part. There are a mixture of it. So, Mark, do you have any? Can you share any global culture fit example you have, which you think that this is a really culturally fit deal? Do you have any suggestions?
So one comes to mind with a New York company and a Swedish company. So the New York company was a very entrepreneurial software company, and they were working. They were a startup. They were just about 4 or 5 years in from being a startup. Very entrepreneurial. They were not afraid to knock on doors or do sales or things of that nature. And there were about 3 or 4 people there who were the founders, who really made the decisions. And they put a lot of emphasis on individual performance. The Swedish company, and they were more research and development. And they were interested in bringing this other organization to in a sense, help them sell and get into more markets,
Yeah.
because they were more likely to work on a new piece of software, so to speak, but they would want to work on it until it was 100% flawless.
Yeah.
So the good news was it was very sound, but they were having trouble staying in business because they weren't out there
Yeah.
selling.
Right.
So you had mentioned bringing the leadership teams together. So one of the things that I advised the client to do, and then we facilitated, was actually bringing them together in Sweden for a 3-day meeting to talk about their companies. What were their strengths? What were the areas that they were looking to improve? How coming together as organizations would do that? And then barriers. And we tried to put culture things on the table. As you know, they're all, in a sense, they all helped both companies get to where they were. But if they really wanted to get the value of the deal, they had to find a way to make it work. One company needed to move faster. One company needed to move perhaps a little more slowly.
Yeah.
And you know, they've been very successful, but I think that was something that if they just assumed that culture would solve itself, they would have really had a problem. You had talked to me a little bit too about something in your experience from a global perspective.
Right.
I'd be interested to just learning more about
that.
Yeah,
so you know, I have so like one of the example I can give you, you know, that I used to work for a French company, and they used to do acquisition around the world, and they were a very acquisitive company. So one of the acquisition was in London, and they had very different culture. So what we did at the first part is we had lots of culture meeting at the beginning. We identified that, you know, what are the key topics could come and what are the cultural conflicts we could have. So those things got identified very early. And also the way we are communicating, because they also have factory people, and they were in different countries. So what we used to do, we did a communication plan, and also we used to check, it's kind of a pulse survey. The pulse survey objective was to make sure that how much, you know, first day we gave a couple of questions. We asked them that, you know, can you tell me whether you know about this acquisition?
Yeah.
Are you happy? Are you not happy? Do you think this acquisition is going to bring some change in you? So what we did, we started communicating at the very low level employee who are working in a factories and, you know, soft floor. And that really helped them to educate, bring them in our culture, explain them that it's not a job, it is not a job loss, but we are trying to bring you in the company. A new company is going to find a better position for you, better opportunities. And since you are a small company, you are coming to a larger company. So I think this helped us to really fill the culture gap.
Yeah.
Similarly, we did for middle managers and all, and also from the acquired company, there are already top managers who were identified who will work along with our company. So the initial integration team after day one, in fact, day one we had people identified, you know, who are the key people who are going to work. So for each stream, we identified the counterpart who will be working. So I know at the beginning there was a little bit of, you know, classes that I don't want to share this information, I will not do this. But after some time, it became more of teamwork, and objective was very clearly said that this is what we want to achieve. So I think that way we manage culture a lot, because I never had any issue in that. Almost I saw that people are, you know, not losing job. Their job have been identified that what next opportunity they are going to do. Next 1 year, at least everybody know what they are going to do. So I think that took care a lot of things. I think the post-merger integration challenges like employee not aware what is going to happen, right? Those challenges were resolved very early. So now what happens if I'm a manager from the acquired company and I know exactly what I'm going to do. So now I know how I have to bring my team up, what are the opportunity I have to provide, how I am going to, you know, reposition within my bigger organization. So I think these are the things, these are few things, there are many things. Really, it was helpful for bringing the culture gap to, you know, almost negligible. Yeah. So So at least initial classes were not there. And that really worked because then team was focused after day one. Team really started working on 100 days. And each team members have, very open to share their information, what they are doing, how they are doing, what challenges they have. And of course, everybody have same communication kit. So that also helped them to go and communicate within their company, because at the beginning, not many people are coming and being part of integration team. But those guys who are coming and who are working across different streams, these are the key people in the company. And they have their larger team. And those guys are also around the world. They are sitting in different offices, doing different things like sales, marketing, supply chain, and all this. It was very, helpful. As earlier, I think you brought a point where bringing everybody in one room, and that really worked for us.
Good.
We really made sure that it was a big investment, but it was very helpful to bring people together. And that we did very early.
And I think too, then, it's sometimes, and maybe this is true in global, there may be assumptions about how people think and how people do things. But when you get together across a table with a meal, then it's as individuals. And I think it just peels back those layers. Something also you reminded me of, and I guess this is, I don't hear it talked about as much, but one of the key ways culture is communicated is the leaders that are selected. That's the clearest way to communicate culture, because if it's the person who is someone who is clearly, let's say, just focused on themselves, or that they're not looking for input in that, a company can put out a lot of messages about culture, but ultimately the employees look at who get the jobs. And that's really the proof. And there's that old saying that people join companies and leave managers. So that's probably the strongest cultural message. And that's also a secret too. If a company wants to change the culture quickly, change it right at the point of hire. And promotion. And that's going to send the signal more than anything else. Because it's the reality.
Exactly. So, now this brings another very important point related to post-merger integration. So if you look at, as soon as deal is announced and we are heading towards integration, most of the time I find that employees are restless. They are very stressful. They don't know exactly what is next for them. Right. And that also brings lots of, people become more, they don't really, they are not very committed. They become very unproductive. And this I have really seen in most of the deals. People are not aware and they are unnecessary in too much stress. What is going to happen to next? So how, generally companies should prepare so that implies to be resilient and also adaptable in this M&A transaction.
And I think that's one of the, in my experience, it probably wasn't talked about 10 years ago, maybe even 5 years ago, and that's resilience. But certainly in the last year and a half, 2 years with COVID and changes around the world, and even mental health issues coming up related to those. I recall listening to an organizational psychologist saying, there's really two pandemics. There's a health pandemic, and then there's a mental health pandemic. There's really two. And I think that's one of the factors we see now with the turnover rates overall. And employees, according to surveys, 50% looking to find a new job. And then if in an M&A situation, of course, if you already have that, which again, maybe you didn't have 2 years ago, now you put on top of that the stress of an integration. Now you really have a retention problem. But not only that, you have something I call the triple bump scenario, which is an A player leaves, there's a B player left.
Mhm.
Well, the B player is going to hire a C player. So now as an organization, not only are you losing your A players, but you're hiring C players
Mhm.
and maybe a few B players. And, you know, you're going to have trouble getting to where you want to go with that. And that's harder to fix
Mhm.
once you get down to that.
Mhm.
So, you know, so I think the notion of resiliency here is something that companies have tried to address. I think some very successfully by, first of all, acknowledging the problem. Second of all, providing resources, whether it's with an add to an employee assistance program, or it's speakers or other information, or even more leaves that someone can take.
Mhm.
So there's also just things an individual can do, you know. So for example, just at an individual level, and I'd be interested to learn how maybe you incorporate that into your practices as well. But for me, I definitely take more time for physical health, to be sure, you know, for exercise and diet, and being able to step back and maybe just think about things a little bit more than I might have been more contemplative, because, you know, in this environment, there's so many things that are coming at you. And I think that's, you know, we talk about culture as well. The healthier the leader is and the staff, the more the other employees are going to feel that concern. I think, and I haven't seen it too much, companies saying, well, we're going to go back the way we were before. Everybody's going to be in the office, and we're just going to pretend that other thing didn't happen, and this is the way we're going to do it. But the difference is, you know, over 70% of employees don't want to go back to the office. So where does this fit into M&A? Well, resilience is certainly key. But the other part is an integration, which we wouldn't have thought about 18 to 24 months ago, is how are they handling, how is the target company, how is the seller handling return to work? Because the buyer may be buying a company where, again, 75% of the people don't want to come back to the office. Is that okay? It might be, or it might not be. So the resilience also goes from the personal to the business, is how much is how much in the workplace today is going to be changing in that seller's business that is going to be a challenge for integration, or is going to help integration.
Yeah, thanks. I think this is a very good input, Mark. So another question which I had is, since you work with different companies, how you really develop these change management capabilities, M&A integration capabilities to their leadership team, middle managers, or maybe the people who are part of M&A integration teams. So how you generally do have some, maybe you can give some idea how you do that.
Sure. Yeah. So thank you for that, because building capabilities is the fourth key. You know, it's change, it's communication, it's culture, and it's capabilities. So why are capabilities important? It's because simply the better educated, the more experienced leaders are, the better their deals turn out. You know, that's a general rule, which seems to be very true in my experience. So I'll take a couple different models. One model would be, we hire consultants, they do all the work, and then they go away. And then for the next deal, the consultants come in, they do all the work, then they go away. Believe me, I have nothing against consulting, but there's a middle ground there, where the consultants, in addition to doing the work, are also helping the client scale and build their capabilities. And to me, that's really, if I'm making the investment on the other side, which I did when I was in my corporate job, that would always be part of, how is knowledge transfer going to occur? You mentioned earlier about lessons learned.
Yeah, yeah,
Same type of thing. Where's that going to be captured?
Yeah.
How's that going to make us better the next time?
yeah,
So that's something a company can do. They don't need a consultant to do that. But with a consultant, there may be playbooks and roadmaps
Yeah.
and things
yeah,
that, you can't just, it's like if you gave a doctor's bag to someone, they're not ready to operate, right? They
Yeah.
have the tools, they're not ready
Yeah.
to operate.
right.
So you need to close the gap.
Mhm.
So I think it's some of the same principles. First, you acknowledge that it's a priority.
Yeah.
Then you design a way to do it.
Mhm.
You implement it, but then you also measure the results.
Yeah.
And because at the end of it, people should have a level of skills so the next time they can do more. So maybe at one point, I'm a member of an integration team, say in the finance department.
Yeah.
Well, if the next acquisition, maybe I want to be a team leader.
Yeah.
Or then maybe I'm going to be a senior member of the IMO, or maybe at one point I'm going to be the change manager for the next thing. So in a sense, it's also looking at a career path around managing change.
Right.
Now, some companies aren't going to be acquiring 5 to 10 other companies a year, but I always think about those skills for integration. Very simple for any high stakes change project. Systems implementation, digital transformation, going into a new geography, rolling out a new product line. So it's building M&A capabilities, but it's also building change capabilities. So how do you do that? Couple levels. Certainly, as adults, 70% of what we learn from others. So if we're getting people engaged in teams, we're giving them important assignments and responsibilities, that's going to be 70% of how they learn from that type of thing. 20% might be group coaching, mentoring, and those shared experiences where, like, the lessons learned, or sometimes it's called after action review. What happened? What did we try to do? What happened? What do we need to do differently? So that's learning from each other in a sense, but now there's a little bit of an expert dimension in there. And then 10% of adult learning is what you learn online, what you read in a book. And it's really important, but it's only 10%. 70% is just, I've done it. Maybe I've failed at it, but if I fail at it and I learn, then that's a different experience. And so the other piece of capabilities, I think, is focus. So that would be kind of like with leadership selection. I want to make a plan, or I want to identify who the people are that need to build those capabilities and how much. So some of the source of that might be succession plans. Some of it might be performance management. Some of it might be, who was promoted into a new role in the last year that's going to need a little more than the person who's been in there. But I also think about 3 factors: can do, will do, and should do. So what does that mean? So can they do it? Well, if they can't do it, they can't do all of it right away. Not that difficult. Identify the gaps, how you're going to address the gaps. Will do, that's a little bit more tricky. You can solve can do more than will do. It may mean that if someone is it's okay to be a skeptic in a deal early on, but not a cynic, not someone who's going to pull people back. And then there's the should do. And I think about that in terms of culture. If someone is not a role model for the desired culture, well, then they probably shouldn't have a leadership role, because they're going to send the wrong message about what culture is. That's an awful lot, but
I know. I know this is always a challenge when we, any deal we do. Always it is inside team or external advisor who does what, and knowledge management, the building the team capability for future deals. These are all challenging, and I know company have started realizing that capitalizing on all the lesson learned, right, and really capturing. Both are important. One is first capturing across all the streams, IMO, how we have done day one to 100 days and integration year one,
Sure.
and really sharing this within our group. So that suppose you are new to the team, you should have some background to go and have a look. What are the best practices we have followed? What are the things we did not work in one deal, might not work in other deal as well. So maybe you are at least taking care of, these are the basic things. But I have seen that company have realized and they want to retain the knowledge. They want to really make sure that those knowledge, those, capabilities, what they have built across several years, across several deals, they are going to really use and reuse it for future deals. And I think this is the key message for most of the company. And another challenge which I think I will like to add here, many times what happens is, suppose I work for a company, I'm doing 5 deals, and maybe I took 3 to 4 years to complete all these deals. Now I'm no more involved, or maybe I changed my another role. I moved out of M&A role and I joined some business role. Now what happens is, whatever lesson learned I have, it goes along with me. If I don't capture, if I don't summarize, if I don't do the proper knowledge transfer. So this is what company have to really make sure that they put effort at the beginning, because if it is too much knowledge and it is not captured early, what happens after some time, it is very, very hard to really capture them.
Yes, that's right.
Right. So I think I have several examples, Mark. So we did lots of deal, and always this was one of the challenge. But some of the best practices we put in the team, that any critical milestone in deal we accomplish, all the team, they meet together, either face to face or virtually. We really go and summarize the key learning, what we could have done better, so that, and we not just discuss, we also make few slides and we keep them as a best practices and we share to all the team. Also, we try to store it in a common place so that everybody who is working in a part of M&A team, they can have access. So if I'm new to the team, for me, I don't have to really go and start from scratch. I can go and have some references. I can go and read some of the best practices people are following, and I can pick some of the best practice which I feel that is good for the deal. So I think thanks for bringing this point. This is very important, and I know this. If we keep talking like this, we have lots of questions. So I think, Mark, we talked about our 4 keys to engage and retain talented people during next acquisition. Now, I have few questions from you is, what steps you recommend for company which are struggling to integrate post acquisition? So what are your recommendation you give to companies?
Yeah, so sometimes this is known as merger repair, and that is that for whatever reason, the integration hasn't happened. Sometimes it can even be intentional. Well, we're not going to integrate right away. We're going to wait a year.
Yeah.
We're going to wait. And then, of course, a year becomes 2 years.
Yeah.
And then that one company is actually 6 companies because they've never integrated. So it's a challenging situation. I see it a lot, frankly. And so it's in a sense going back to the due diligence, going to, in order to just refresh the knowledge of where those differences are. And it's essentially creating an integration plan or designing an integration plan just on those areas that are the most critical. So it's very similar to designing that first integration plan. It's going to be a lot more difficult because now the message has been, you don't need to change. So the new message, it's like the clock has to restart. Change management, communications, culture, etc. And it's going to be it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy because I think there's an expectations things will change when 2 companies first come together. But then if they haven't integrated, it's kind of sent the message that, well, we don't need to do that. So I think communications is going to be even more important than in change management to answer the question of why now. And often there's a cost answer to that, right? Duplication in the back office. But it might also be that the company is not able to get to market well because they're working through 5 or 6 different organizations, and they don't have the synergy that they originally looked at. And that's actually the other point in the communication and in looking at that is, what are the drivers? And typically it's synergies that were expected that have not occurred. And sometimes it's the acquirer itself wants to put itself up for sale, and they need to do the work themselves so they get a better valuation. And I've seen this several times. It's like, well, we brought in these 6 companies, we were rewarded for acquiring it, but now if we go to market, we have 6 different companies, 6 different benefit plans, 6 different compensation plans, 6 different IT groups. So everyone in the audience knows what that's like. You want to go to market at your best. You don't want to go the other way. So
that way. So it's a very important point. I think the good part for what we focus on is how to engage and retain the talent during any M&A deal you do. And I think all the topics what we covered, almost 4 areas, they are very critical. Either you go for bigger deal, a smaller deal, they all are relevant across any deal. So I think thanks, Mark. And I also like to tell my audience how they will be able to reach you.
Great, thank you. So there's only one Walztoni at Crowe, and that's me. My email is mark, M-A-R-K, .Walztoni, W-A-L-Z-T-O-N-I, @crowe.com. You can also find me on LinkedIn, and happy to discuss your situation or just anything here on the broadcast. So it'd be 1-616-550-5945. So thank you very much. I really appreciate the opportunity to
thank you, Mark. And I hope our audience will have more questions to you, because I know this time is not enough to cover all the topics, and people is always very critical for any M&A deal. So I think we'll again invite you for another session where we'll focus more on people part, culture, and talk to you again in a few days.
Well, great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.